Hello everyone, this is POW. In this update, we're going to be talking about a May cool down that's going to last through the middle of May. So if you're new to the channel, click the subscribe button and notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. So let's get right to it. First of all, let's start off with the overall 30-year averages. These actually updated yesterday on May the 4th, and I thought this was fairly interesting because this breaks down the annual average rainfall a certain area gets in the United States over a 30-year time span. And you can definitely see the trend as we went through the 1900s, getting into the 1910 period, as we progressively getting somewhat wetter as we've been trending into the 70s, into the 80s, and especially now into 2020. So overall, we are seeing a predominantly wetter pattern as we go through and getting extended throughout the time frame. And we are also experiencing a little bit warmer conditions as well. If we take you back all the way to the early 1900s, we had much cooler weather on average, and these have been ticking upward throughout the period, and these adjust every 10 years. So just yesterday, our 30-year new normals have come out, and overall for the US, they have risen in temperatures. You can definitely see the trend of 0.16 overall per decade and a rise in temperature if you just basically take the average of the high temperature and the low temperature and divide that over 365 days over 10 years, and you basically come to, on average, a trend of 0.16 degrees above average, increase in temperature every single year. So that's been a telling sign. And then also, here's the end zone neutral. So we've been predominantly in a La Nina pattern. We are now officially reached the end zone neutral mark. It's been changing since about February, but you can notice a trend. I mean, we've been predominantly getting some wetter time frames and some wetter periods. A lot of it has to do with the warmer than average temperatures of the Gulf of Mexico into the Atlantic Ocean. But this trend should continue. And obviously now we're into May. We're going into the wettest time of the year for much of the central and southern US. So I do expect a lot more rain that's going to be on the table, especially as some of these teleconnections are implying. So, and a cool down. So let's take a look at the latest NAO, which is your North Atlantic oscillation. And we've been predominantly negative. I mean, we had that cooler weather that came in April, and that has looked like just can continue into May. You can definitely see these cooling trends. We try to get to somewhat average, a normal, but we go back negative. So predominantly that lowers the jet stream, and that allows the cooler air to keep funneling in the US. And that, I think that continues to remain for the foreseeable future, because the AO basically implies the same thing. So we've got two teleconnections already telling you the jet stream's going to dip, and that's going to allow that cooler air to come into the US. But that's also going to keep our severe weather chances alive and well, and if not elevated, with that particular type setup as we go deeper into May. Here's your MJO, which is your Man and Julie oscillation as well. That also implies, I mean, when you go, we've been in predominantly 7, 8, much a little bit cooler time frame, going into 1. That's also a cool down, especially as we go into 2, getting into that second week of May. 2, you can see the setup over the Indian Ocean. Whenever you have a flare up of thunderstorms over the end of the ocean, that usually makes the US, or at least the central part of the US, pretty active. And so this is a phase that you're going to see for a pretty active severe weather for the second week of May, because the MJO is predominantly going to be in phase 2. So we're going to be getting that cool down, but these cold fronts aren't going to push it all the way through the deep south. So it's going to be more or less stalling, and that's going to create that severe weather aspect for the Central Plains and the South and Southeast. So if we take a look at some of these anomalies, you can definitely see the cool down, and I broke these down over a 5-day period. So we had that very active weather that pushed through the past several days. That is now pushing off the East Coast, and we've got that cool northwest flow taking advantage of that negative NAO, negative AO. That colder anomalies keeps pressing further south, and off the northwest flow, that's a dry flow. So we're going to be seeing much drier conditions as we go through the period through the end of the week, with these much colder anomalies setting up over the Ohio Valley and getting in some of the portions of the southeast. But you can definitely see some of the warmer temperatures. Now these are just averages over the next 5 days. A lot of these areas down south, I mean, you're well, for these low temperatures, you're well into the 60s by now for these low temperatures. So we're only talking, 58 degrees, sometimes in the 60s for these average temperatures down here. But this cold front, it's not going to be able to go all the way down to the south. And that's going to be creating that severe weather aspect, especially as we go into, it could be as early as Saturday for much of the plains, especially going into Sunday for Mother's Day. But for this purpose of the video, I wanted to concentrate on the cool down that's coming up, because this cool down, you can see the jet stream pretty much aligns over the central US. It doesn't really impact too much of the south, and that's going to create, as those cold fronts pretty much stall around these areas, pretty much going to create that, keep that flow, that southwest flow alive. That's going to be creating that inclement weather, some very active period, a rainy period, stormy period, and that warmer weather will stay out west with your positive PNA, your Pacific North Atlantic out there, with your well above average temperatures predominantly happening again for out in the west coast. And if we just extend the period, even going into that 11 to 16 day time frame, this goes all the way through May 21st. You can see a little bit cooler anomalies still try to continue to hang on for the central and southern US, while the ridge keeps building and getting even deepening out west with those 10, 15, even higher anomalies out there with much drier air. So if we actually kind of break this down as far as precipitation goes, yeah, you can definitely see we're in an MJO phase 2, where that's a very active phase. We got that ridge over the west coast. That's just sinking air, dry air. It's very difficult to rain in that type of condition. We've got much different setup in the central US. We got the stalling period of these cold fronts going to be stalling over the central US. That's going to create those overrunning conditions, probably that severe weather chance keeping alive for much of the plains, much of the south, and much of the southeast, and well above average precipitation as well. And we can actually see some even flooding rains as we go into especially the second week of May, after we end that dry spell, once those winds kind of turn around from the southwest. So if we actually break this down on a day-to-day basis as far as low temperatures, you can actually see the actual low temperatures we're going to be setting up. So if we come to Thursday, May the 6th, you can see we've got even some freezing temperatures entering the Dakotas, much of the higher elevations of Wyoming and Colorado, but much widespread 40s for much of the central and Ohio Valley, getting up into the northeast, as these even 57 is below average for portions of North Texas here. But you can see the 50s deepening all the way down into the southeast. If we take it to Friday, May the 7th, that colder air continues to push. You can see below freezing temperatures well to the north. So a lot of this is going to be feeling pretty good, to the body for the middle of May for a cool down. Much of these temperatures are actually going to be below average here, like I mentioned. But yeah, 40s for much of the Tennessee Valley, getting into the Carolinas. You can see off the coast here, 40s in Washington and Oregon and parts of California. Look at New Mexico checking in near 60 degrees as far as your low temperatures. As we go into Saturday, yeah, I mentioned that cold front really doesn't sink too much further south. We've got those colder temperatures well to the north. with those below average anomalies creeping into parts of the Pacific Northwest, and that'll change over once we get past this big cold front on Monday. But yeah, some of these low averages will be into the 40s and much of the southeast, getting into the mid-Atlantic states, still checking in the 30s. For your morning low temperatures. As we go into Sunday, that's when we can start seeing that cold front really start entering the picture and getting a little bit further south. And that's going to be setting the stage for probably a severe threat over the plains. You can see the cold air does not enter Texas as we go. These are low temperatures, low of 72. So that tells you one thing right there, that severe weather is not that far away with the low of 72 as we got cold air approaching. And then these will be only extending into Monday. Like I mentioned, we do dip down a little bit, but that cold air looks to stall around Oklahoma, maybe the Red River areas. That's going to create those overrunning aspects, creating more of a heavier rain threat over much of North Texas, getting into Oklahoma, getting much of the plains with that severe weather threat setting up over there with the colder temperatures well to the north, hanging into the 40s, and much of the Iowa, getting into Illinois, getting into Ohio areas, and much of the northeast. You can definitely see the well above average anomalies well down to the south and the southeast with 60s and 70s hanging on in Florida. As we extend into Tuesday, you can definitely see the colder temperatures up to the north. That colder air does not make it down to the south, so that's going to be creating again that the heavier rains for much of the south and southeast, getting into portions of the plains as well, as it's going to be taking advantage of, again, that step down process of cooler temperatures is going to be entering the picture for much of next week, and that it just extends through the middle of May. So yeah, I mean, we had some below average anomalies in April, and that is just look likely it's going to be extending for the foreseeable future into the month of May. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely leave your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.